Jake Turner walked into the giant meeting room on Station Nexus Prime for what he hoped would be the last time. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. In the center sat a massive table that could hold 50 beings from different worlds. Today, only 12 seats were filled. Jake was tired. 3 years of these meetings had worn him down. 3 years of listening to alien creatures talk about humans like they were children who needed to be controlled. 3 years of demands that got worse every time they met. He sat down in the human chair, which was too small and uncomfortable. The aliens had made it that way on purpose. Everything here was designed to make humans feel small and unimportant. Lisa, Grant sat beside him. She used to be an admiral in the Human Defense Fleet before she became Jake's military advisor. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the anger in her eyes. Lisa had lost many friends to pirate attacks while the Council's ships were nowhere to be found. Across from them sat High Arbitrator Zeftar. The being looked like a walking crystal formation, 12 feet tall with edges that caught the light. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Ambassador Turner," Zeftar said, "we have prepared our final offer for human membership in the Galactic Council." Jake had heard those words before. Every offer had been worse than the last. He waited. A snake-like creature called Vorthak slithered forward. Its scales were dark green and its yellow eyes never blinked. "Humans will surrender 90% of all military vessels to Council control," it hissed. "This is not negotiable." Jake felt his stomach drop. 90%. They had started at 50% 3 years ago. An insect creature that looked like a giant mantis clicked its mandibles. This was Kreeth, the representative of the hive worlds. "All human colonies on contested worlds must be abandoned," Kreeth buzzed. "Humans will return to their home system and remain there." "Contested worlds?" Lisa spoke for the first time. "Those are our colonies. We built them. We've lived there for generations." Kreeth made a sound like angry bees. "The Council has determined these worlds are too close to establish trade routes. Human presence there creates complications." Zeftar raised one crystalline arm. "Furthermore, all remaining human worlds will accept Council overseers. These beings will guide human development and ensure compliance with galactic law." Jake stared at the alien. "Overseers? You mean rulers?" "We prefer the term guides," Zeftar replied. "Humans have shown they cannot be trusted to govern themselves responsibly." Lisa's hand moved toward her sidearm before she caught herself. Jake put a gentle hand on her arm. "What exactly have we done wrong?" Jake asked. Vorthak's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Your species is too aggressive, too independent. You ask too many questions and make too many demands." "We've followed every rule," Jake said. "We've paid every fee. We've attended every meeting for 3 years." "Yes," Zeftar agreed. "But you do so reluctantly. True Council members embrace their place in the galactic order. Humans seem to think they deserve special treatment." Jake looked around the room. The other aliens were watching him with expressions that ranged from boredom to mild disgust. None of them saw humans as equals. They never had. "We just want to be treated fairly," Jake said. Kreeth clicked its mandibles again. "Fair is relative, human. The strong guide the weak, the wise lead the foolish. This is the natural order." "And where exactly do humans fit in this natural order?" Lisa demanded. "Where you belong," Vorthak hissed. "Under proper supervision." Jake had heard enough. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the crystal floor. The sound echoed in the vast room. "Ambassador Turner," Zeftar said, "you have not given us your answer." Jake looked at each alien in turn. He thought about the human colonies that would be abandoned. He thought about the families who would be forced to leave homes they had built with their own hands. He thought about the ships that would be taken away, leaving humanity defenseless against pirates and raiders. He thought about the Council peacekeeping forces that always seemed to arrive too late when human worlds were attacked. He thought, about the trade agreements that favored every species except humans. He thought about 3 years of sitting in rooms like this, being treated like a child begging for scraps. The human delegation withdraws from these negotiations, Jake said quietly. The room fell silent. Even the soft humming of the station's system seemed to stop. Zeftar leaned forward. I beg your pardon? We're done, Jake said, louder this time. Humanity withdraws its application for council membership. We will find our own path among the stars. The aliens stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Then Vorthok began to laugh, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Kreeth joined in with its buzzing chuckle. Soon half the room was laughing. You cannot be serious, Zeftar said. No species survives outside council protection. The galaxy is full of dangers. Pirates, rogue artificial intelligence swarms, worse things that lurk in the dark between stars. We'll take our chances, Jake replied. You will be back within a year, Vorthok hissed, begging for readmission. And when you return, our terms will be even less generous. Jake picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. Lisa followed, her hand resting on her weapon. The aliens' laughter followed them into the corridor. As they walked toward their ship, Lisa finally spoke. That felt good. Jake nodded. Yeah, it did. Behind them in the crystal meeting room, the aliens were already making plans. Plans to contain the human problem before it could spread to other species. Plans to teach humanity a lesson about defying the natural order. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 6 months had passed since Jake Turner walked out of that crystal meeting room. Now he stood in the Oval Office, watching President Carol Stevens prepare for the most important speech in human history. Carol was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been president for only 2 years when the council negotiations collapsed. Now she faced a choice that would determine humanity's future. Are you sure about this, Carol? Jake asked. Once we announce it, there's no going back. Carol looked at the report scattered across her desk. Intelligence from human colonies showed council ships gathering at the borders of human space. The aliens were preparing to force humanity into submission. They've made the choice for us, Carol said. We can accept slavery or choose freedom. That's not really a choice at all. Dr. Alex Martinez entered the room carrying a tablet computer. He was humanity's leading expert on alien worlds and had once believed that joining the council was humanity's best hope. The failed negotiations had changed his mind completely. The survey teams have finished their reports, Alex said. We've found 17 star systems beyond the galactic rim that could support human life. They're far from council space, in regions the aliens consider too dangerous to explore. Dangerous how? Jake asked. Alex shrugged. The usual stories. Space pirates, radiation storms, ancient automated defense systems, the kind of things that scare civilized council species. Carol smiled for the first time in months. But not humans. Not humans, Alex agreed. 3 hours later, Carol stood before cameras that would broadcast her words to every human world. Behind her hung the flag of Earth, blue and green against a field of stars. My fellow humans, she began, 6 months ago, our representatives withdrew from negotiations with the Galactic Council. Today, I am announcing the New Horizon Initiative. Rather than accept the Council's terms of surrender, humanity will leave Council space entirely. The reaction was immediate. News feeds exploded with commentary. Some called it suicide. Others called it the only honorable choice. On New Geneva, the human colony world closest to Council space, Mayor Ben Rodriguez watched the speech with his wife Maria. They had built their lives on this world, raised their children here. Now they would have to leave it all behind. We can't take everything, Maria said, looking around their home. Ben put his arm around her shoulders. We'll take what matters. The rest is just stuff. Similar conversations were happening on 12 human colony worlds. Families were making impossible choices about what to keep and what to leave behind. But there was something in their voices that the council had never understood. They were scared, but they were also excited. Captain Ben Rodriguez, the mayor's older brother, commanded the UNS Endeavour, the largest colony ship ever built. His ship would lead the first wave of Exodus vessels into unknown space. Ben had fought pirates on the rim worlds for 10 years. He knew what dangers waited in the dark. How many ships in the first wave? He asked his communications officer. 87 colony ships, Captain, plus escorts. Ben nodded. Nearly 2 million people would make the first jump into uncharted space. If they found nothing but death out there, at least they would die free. Amy Foster was a journalist who had covered the council negotiations from the beginning. Now she walked through the loading bays of Luna Station, interviewing families as they prepared to leave everything behind. "Are you scared?" she asked a woman named Jenny Walsh, who was boarding with her 3 young children. Jenny looked at her kids, who were excited about the adventure ahead. "Of course I'm scared. But I'm more scared of what happens if we stay. I don't want my children growing up as slaves." An old man named Pete Harrison overheard the conversation. He had fought in the border wars 20 years earlier, back when humans were still expanding into contested space. "Young lady," he said to Amy, "we've been in worse spots than this. Humans don't quit. We adapt. We overcome. We survive." The loading process took months. Entire cities were dismantled piece by piece. Factories, hospitals, schools, everything that could be moved was loaded onto massive cargo ships. What couldn't be moved was destroyed rather than left for the council to claim. Dr. Martinez coordinated the massive effort from a command center on Luna. His screens showed the locations of every ship, every cargo container, every family making the journey. It was the largest voluntary migration in galactic history. "The Deltari are asking if they can come with us," his assistant reported. Alex looked up from his calculations. The Deltari were a peaceful species that had been bullied by the council for decades. "Tell them yes. Anyone who wants freedom is welcome." The council watched the exodus with amusement. Vorthok sent regular reports to Zeftar about the human folly. The snake-like alien was certain that humanity would be extinct within a year. "Let them go," Zeftar declared. "When the survivors crawl back begging for mercy, we will be generous. Perhaps we will only demand 95% of their remaining ships." The first wave of ships gathered at the edge of human space. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, looking at the greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Colony ships stretched as far as sensors could detect. "All ships report ready, Captain," his navigator announced. Rodriguez thought about his brother Ben, loading families onto transports planetside. He thought about President Stevens, who had risked everything on this desperate gamble. He thought about Jake Turner, who had simply said no when it mattered most. "Signal all ships," Rodriguez commanded. "Prepare for jump to coordinates beyond the rim." The fleet began to move, slowly at first, then gaining speed. One by one, the ships activated their jump drives and disappeared into hyperspace. They were heading for systems that existed only on theoretical star charts, worlds that might not even be habitable. Behind them, they left empty colonies and abandoned stations. They left behind 300 years of human expansion and development, but they took with them something more valuable than any material possession. They took their freedom. The last ship to jump was a small courier vessel carrying Jake Turner back to Earth. As it entered hyperspace, Jake watched the council monitoring stations through the viewport. The aliens were probably celebrating, thinking they had won. They had no idea that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. 2 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim. High Arbitrator Zeftar rarely thought about them anymore. The crystal being was busy with more important matters, like settling trade disputes between the Vorthak and the Kreeth. The council had divided up the abandoned human colonies among member species. Vorthak claimed the mining worlds. The Kreeth took the agricultural planets. Everyone was happy with the arrangement. "The human problem has resolved itself," Zeftar told the council during their weekly meeting. "As predicted, they have probably starved or been destroyed by pirates. We need not concern ourselves with them further." The other council members agreed. It was better this way. Humans had been too much trouble anyway. Commander Rick Hayes of the Council patrol ship Vengeance was thinking the same thing when his communications officer received a distress call. Rick was human, one of the few who had stayed behind when the exodus began. He believed the Council offered the best protection for his species. "Sir, we're getting an emergency signal from a Vorthak trader," the officer reported. "Ship designation, Profit Seeker. They're under attack by pirates in the Outer Rim." Rick sighed. Pirate attacks were common in that region. The Council Navy rarely patrolled there because it was too expensive and dangerous. "Set course for their location. Best speed." When the Vengeance arrived at the coordinates, Rick expected to find wreckage or nothing at all. Instead, he found something that made no sense. The Vorthak trading ship was damaged but intact. Around it floated the remains of 6 pirate vessels. But these weren't ordinary battle remains. The pirate ships had been destroyed with surgical precision. Every weapon had been targeted and eliminated. Every engine had been disabled before the final killing shots. "Captain," his tactical officer called out, "I'm reading weapon signatures I don't recognize." Rick studied the data. The energy patterns were human, but more advanced than anything he remembered from Earth's military. Scan for survivors. They found 3 pirates alive in an escape pod. When Rick's security team brought them aboard, the pirates were shaking with fear. "Who attacked you?" Rick demanded. The pirate leader, a scarred alien called Grix, could barely speak. "Humans," he whispered. "They came out of nowhere. Ships we'd never seen before. They didn't even try to talk, just started shooting." Rick felt cold. "Humans. That's impossible. They're all dead or gone." Grix shook his head frantically. No, they're out there. They're hunting us. They've destroyed the Blood Claw Gang, the Razor Fleet, even the Iron Brotherhood. Nobody is safe anymore." Rick dismissed the pirates' claims as desperate lies, but over the next few weeks, similar reports started coming in from across the Outer Rim. Sarah Blake worked as the Council's chief intelligence analyst. Her job was to track threats to Council space and member species. Lately, that job had become very confusing. "The pattern doesn't make sense," she told her assistant while reviewing incident reports. "Pirate activity in the Outer Rim has dropped by 60% in the last 6 months." Her assistant, a young Deltari named Vel, looked at the data. "That should be good news." "It would be if they were just hiding," Sarah replied. "But they're not hiding. They're disappearing. Entire pirate bases that have operated for decades are found empty. No signs of fighting, no bodies, nothing. Like everyone just vanished." The reports kept coming. The Crimson Fleet, a group of raiders, so dangerous that even the Council Navy avoided them, had sent out a single message 3 days ago. "The humans are coming." Then silence. Sarah pulled up a star map showing the locations of all reported incidents. A pattern emerged that made her blood run cold. The attacks were moving inward, toward Council space, following the old trade routes that pirates used to target merchant ships. "Vel," she said quietly, "send a priority message to High Arbitrator Zeftar. Tell him I need to brief the Council. Immediately." The next day, Sarah stood in the same crystal chamber where Jake Turner had walked away from negotiations 2 years earlier. The Council members looked bored, as if her presence was an inconvenience. "Honored Council," Sarah began, "we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim that requires immediate attention." Zeftar's crystalline form caught the light as he leaned forward. "Pirates fighting among themselves is hardly our concern." "This isn't pirates fighting pirates," Sarah replied. "Someone is systematically hunting and eliminating every criminal organization in the outer sectors. The weapon signatures are human." The chamber fell silent. Vorthak's tongue flicked out nervously. "Impossible, the humans are extinct." "That's what we assumed," Sarah said. "But the evidence suggests otherwise. 3 minor species have reported contact with human vessels offering protection services. The Deltari, the Merhai, and the Lumtar have all received the same message." She activated a hologram showing a simple text communication. The Free Worlds Alliance offers protection to any species willing to reject Council membership and embrace freedom. Kreeth's mandibles clicked angrily. Lies and propaganda. No species would be foolish enough to trust humans over the Council. Sarah's next words sent shockwaves through the chamber. All 3 species have accepted the human offer. They withdrew from Council membership yesterday. The room erupted in angry buzzing, hissing, and crystalline chiming. For the first time in millennia, the Council's membership had actually decreased. Zeftar raised his arms for silence. This is clearly human terrorism. They are using fear and violence to steal our members. With respect, honored arbitrator, Sarah replied. The violence seems to be directed entirely at criminal organizations. The humans haven't attacked any legitimate government or council facility. Then what do they want? Vorthek demanded. Sarah checked her notes. According to the communications we've intercepted, they want to create a zone of free worlds beyond council control. They're offering protection to any species that chooses to leave. The implications hit the council members like a physical blow. If humans were not only alive but thriving, if they were actively recruiting council members to defect, then everything had changed. How many humans are we talking about? Kreeth asked. Sarah hesitated. Unknown. But the ship classifications we've identified suggest a fleet larger than most council member navies. Zeftar stood up, his crystal body reflecting the chamber's lights in angry patterns. Summon the council fleet. We will end this human rebellion before it spreads further. But as Sarah left the chamber, she wondered if it was already too late. The humans had been gone for 2 years, and in that time they had apparently built something the council had never expected. They had built an alternative. And species across the galaxy were starting to notice. Captain Susan Wright stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching the stars through the main viewport. 3 years had passed since humanity left council space. 3 years of building new colonies, fighting pirates, and proving that humans could survive without alien protection. Susan commanded one of 12 ships in Battle Group 7, part of the human free world's defense fleet. Her ships were patrolling the border between free space and council territory, protecting the growing number of species that had joined the human alliance. Captain, her communications officer called. Out, we're receiving a distress signal. Susan turned toward the young officer. From who? A Kreeth colony world called Hive 7. They're under massive pirate attack. Susan frowned. The Kreeth were the insect-like aliens who had helped humiliate humanity during the council negotiations. They were no friends to humans. But the Free Worlds Alliance had a simple rule. They protected anyone who asked for help, regardless of politics. How far? Susan asked. 6 hours at maximum jump speed. Susan looked at her tactical display. 12 human ships against an unknown number of pirates. The smart thing would be to call for reinforcements. But Hive 7 might not have 6 hours, and reinforcements could take days to arrive. Signal the fleet, Susan ordered. We're responding to the distress call. Her first officer, Commander Tony Phillips, looked worried. Captain, this could be a trap. The Kreeth have never asked humans for help before. Then this will be a first, Susan replied. Set course for Hive 7. The jump to Kreeth space took 5 hours and 40 minutes. When the human ships dropped out of hyperspace, Susan saw a sight that made her jaw clench. 63 pirate vessels surrounded the planet, bombarding the surface with plasma cannons. The colony's defense satellites had been destroyed. Civilian evacuation ships were trying to escape but being hunted down like animals. My God, Tony whispered. There must be millions of Kreeth down there. Susan studied the tactical display. 63 enemy ships versus 12 human vessels. The odds were terrible. But the pirates were spread out, focused on attacking the planet. They weren't expecting a fight. All ships, this is Captain Wright. Form attack pattern Delta. We're going in fast and hard. Hit the ships targeting the evacuation craft first. The human fleet accelerated toward the planet. The pirates didn't notice them until it was too late. Human military doctrine had evolved during 3 years of fighting for survival. Every battle had taught them new lessons. Every encounter with pirates had shown them better ways to fight. The Free World's fleet wasn't just well-trained, it was battle-tested. The first wave of human ships struck the pirate fleet like a thunderbolt. 6 pirate vessels exploded in the first 30 seconds. The humans didn't waste time with warning, shots, or surrender demands. They had learned that pirates only understood one language. "Target the command ships," Susan ordered. "Cut off their coordination." The battle was brutal, but short. The pirates had superior numbers, but they were used to fighting defenseless merchants and weak planetary militias. They had never faced an opponent that hit back harder than they did. 15 minutes after the first shot was fired, 47 pirate ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled toward deep space, but human pursuit craft hunted them down. None escaped. Susan's ship had taken minor damage. The rest of her fleet was intact. They had destroyed or captured an entire pirate armada with minimal losses. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet." The main screen showed a Kreeth commander, his insect-like features twitching with what Susan had learned was gratitude. "Human ships, this is Hive Commander Zektar. We thank you for your assistance." Susan nodded. "You're welcome, Commander. Do you need medical supplies or repair equipment?" Zektar looked confused. During the Council era, help always came, with a price. "What do you require in return?" "Nothing," Susan replied. "The Free Worlds Alliance protects those who need protection. That's what we do." News of the rescue spread through Council space faster than official communications could travel. The story grew with each telling. 12 human ships had defeated 63 pirates. They had saved millions of Kreeth lives and asked for nothing in return. Dr. Kevin Clark, now serving as humanity's chief diplomat, established the first human embassy in Council space. But he didn't put it on a Council world. Instead, he chose New Deltara, the thriving capital world of the Free Worlds Alliance. The embassy was a simple building with a simple message displayed in 100 languages. Humanity stands ready to defend freedom wherever it's threatened. Within days of the embassy opening, representatives from dozens of species came asking questions. How could they join the Free Worlds Alliance? What were the requirements? What did humans want in return? Kevin's answers surprised them. The Alliance had no membership fees, no tribute requirements, no complex bureaucracy. Species that joined kept their independence and made their own decisions. The only requirement was a commitment to defend each other against threats. It was everything the Council was not. On Hive 7, Commander Zektar filed his report with Council headquarters. He described the human rescue in detail, including their refusal to accept payment or demand political concessions. The report reached High Arbitrator Zeftar within hours, the crystal being read it 3 times before calling an emergency council meeting. "This is unacceptable," Zeftar declared to the assembled aliens. "Humans are undermining our authority by providing better protection than our own forces." Vorthak hissed angrily. "Where was the Council fleet when Hive 7 was attacked? Why didn't we respond to their distress call?" The answer hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present. The Council fleet was too small, too slow, and too bureaucratic to respond to crises. They would have spent days debating whether Hive 7 was worth saving. Kreeth's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "The humans saved millions of my people's lives. Perhaps we should reconsider our relationship with them." "Absolutely not," Zeftar replied. "We will not negotiate with terrorists and rebels." But even as he spoke, Zeftar knew the situation was spiraling out of control. More species were asking questions about the Free Worlds Alliance. More were comparing human protection to Council protection and finding the Council lacking. President Carol Stevens delivered a broadcast that reached every world in Council space. Her message was simple and direct. The invitation stands. Any species that chooses freedom over subjugation will find sanctuary in the Free Worlds Alliance. We ask nothing except that you help us defend each other. That night, 3 more species formally withdrew from Council membership. By the end of the week, it was 7. The exodus had begun. Susan Wright, watching the stars from her ship's bridge, smiled as she read the reports. Humanity had walked away from a bad deal 3 years ago. Now the galaxy was learning that sometimes walking away was the smartest choice you could make. 5 years had passed since Jake Turner walked out of the crystal meeting room on Station Nexus Prime. Now he was walking back into that same room. But everything had changed. This time, Jake wore the uniform of the Free Worlds Alliance. Behind him walked representatives from 47 different species. The crystal chamber that had once held only council members now buzzed with the voices of free worlds. High Arbitrator Zeftar sat alone at the massive table. The other council seats were empty. Forthak had fled to his homeworld when the Snake People's colonies joined the Alliance. Kreeth had formally apologized to humanity and requested membership in the Free Worlds. Even the silicon-based Nexari had switched sides, impressed by human industrial efficiency. Ambassador Turner, Zeftar said, his crystal voice hollow and defeated. You have returned. Jake looked around the empty chamber. I'm not Ambassador Turner anymore. I'm President Turner of the Free Worlds Alliance. And yes, I've returned. But not to beg. Outside the station, the largest fleet in Galactic history hung in space. Ships from dozens of worlds flew in formation under human command. But they weren't there to conquer. They were there to bear witness to the end of an era. Admiral Kate Johnson commanded the joint fleet from her flagship, the UNS Liberty. She had started her career as a junior officer fighting pirates on the Rim. Now she commanded forces from across the galaxy, all united under the simple principle that freedom was worth defending. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from the last 3 council battle groups. Kate nodded. It had been happening all week. Council military forces, tired of political interference and inadequate resources, were defecting to human command. They weren't being forced to surrender, they were choosing to join the winning side. Accept their surrender, Kate ordered. Add their ships to our humanitarian fleet. We'll need them for the refugee operations. Back in the crystal chamber, Jake placed a document on the table in front of Zeftar. The crystal being didn't need to read it to know what it contained. The terms are simple, Jake said. The Galactic Council will dissolve itself peacefully. All remaining member species will be given the choice to join the Free Worlds Alliance or remain independent. Zeftar's crystal form caught the light as he trembled with rage. You cannot simply destroy thousands of years of galactic order. We're not destroying it, Jake replied calmly. We're replacing it with something better. The truth was obvious to everyone in the room. Half the galaxy's species had already joined the Free Worlds Alliance. Trade flowed more freely than it had in centuries. Piracy had been reduced to almost nothing. Wars between member species had ended through human mediation. Dr. Kevin Clark stepped forward. He had been humanity's chief diplomat throughout the transition, helping dozens of species make the change from council control to alliance membership. The Free Worlds Alliance has no emperor, Kevin explained to Zeftar. No Supreme Council, no tribute system. Each world governs itself. We come together only to defend each other and settle disputes peacefully. Zeftar looked at the alien representatives filling his chamber. These were species that had once bowed to council authority. Now they stood as equals, protected by human military might, but governed by their own choices. This is chaos, Zeftar declared. Without central authority, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Jake smiled. 5 years ago, you told me that humans couldn't survive without council protection. How did that work out? The crystal being had no answer. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had created something the council never could, a voluntary association of free peoples who chose to work together instead of being forced to submit. Amy Foster, the journalist who had documented humanity's exodus, now reported on its triumph. She stood in the chamber recording the historic moment when the last galactic empire finally admitted defeat. The council's final mistake, she spoke into her camera, was believing that fear was stronger than hope. They ruled through intimidation and tribute. Humans offered partnership and protection. The galaxy chose freedom. Outside the station, Captain Susan Wright watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the last Council battle group formally surrendered. The ships were ancient, poorly maintained, and undermanned. They were no match for the modern vessels of the Free World's fleet. "Captain," her first officer, Tony Phillips, observed, "it's almost anticlimactic. No great battle, no dramatic last stand." Susan nodded. "The Council lost this war the day they laughed at Jake Turner. They just didn't know it yet." In the crystal chamber, Zeftar finally signed the dissolution order. His hand shook as he applied his crystalline signature to the document that ended. Thousands of years of Council rule. "What happens to me now?" the former High Arbitrator asked. Jake considered the question. By Council law, Zeftar could be executed for his crimes against subjugated species. By human law, he had the right to a fair trial and legal representation. "You have three choices," Jake said. "You can face trial for war crimes. You can accept exile to an uninhabited world. Or you can join the Alliance as an ordinary citizen and help us build something better." Zeftar stared at him in shock. "You would trust me after everything I've done?" "We believe in second chances," Jake replied. "But the choice is yours." The ceremony ended without fanfare. There were no victory parades or celebration ceremonies. The representatives of the Free World's Alliance simply got back to work, helping former Council species transition to self-governance. 6 months later, Jake stood in his office on New Earth, humanity's capital world in free space. Through his window, he could see ships from 100 different worlds docked at the HFY orbital station. Traders, diplomats, scientists, and tourists moving freely through space that had once been controlled by fear. Lisa Grant, now Secretary of Defense for the Alliance, brought him the daily reports. Piracy was down 90%. Trade had increased by 400%. New colonies were being established at a rate not seen since humanity's first expansion into space. "Any regrets?" Lisa asked. Jake thought about the question. 5 years ago, he had walked away from what seemed like humanity's only chance at galactic acceptance. That decision had led to exile, hardship, and the greatest adventure in human history. "None," he said finally. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from a bad deal." Outside his window, the stars beckoned. There were new worlds to explore, new species to meet, new challenges to face. But humanity would face them as free people, allied with others who had chosen the same path. The galaxy was free, and it had all started with one simple word: no.